Hello everyone. Let's begin to the later part of ER model. So I explained the basics of ERD and how to utilize data modeler. And for this video clip, I'm going to explain conceptual understanding about the ER model. Okay, let's get started. And again, you have what you have to draw on your ERD is entity, attributes about the entity, and entities and relationships between entities. Okay, and the requirements to decide entity is pretty straightforward. You have to choose what instances can be repeated, and if you can observe some instances can be repeated, similar instances can be repeated, you have to make an entity which contains the instances, and you have to follow several rules. The name of the entity have to be readable, and the name should carry some atomic information only. All right. So let's see what should be an entity. An object, event, or anything can be repeated should be entity. Okay, an object will have multiple attributes, such as name of college, college of business, college of education, college of nursing, something like this, and location and name of dean or or other attributes. Thinking about your information and your friends in your classes, you have your name, right? Your address, your major, and your student number and your phone number. And just like you, your friends in your classes also have their name, address, phone, and their student number. So instances have multiple attributes which separate each instance in the same entity. Okay. And user of a database system, it shouldn't be an entity. The reason is you have to it could be an entity, but right now the reason is not recommended should be entity is you can design the user of a database system itself about the user I created for you. Okay, so it is you don't need to draw. In other words, you don't need to draw the technical aspect of your system. You can create the users table after you done with designing EL model. This is separate part. So right now at the designing phase it is not recommended to have users of database system as an entity, as an instances in an entity. Okay, and output database cannot be or should not be an entity. The reason is that any output or reports, such as reports, are always dynamic, right? And every time you create report, you may have different data in your report. So you have to leave this output as another component of the database. And also, it is possible to create a report using data information in your database. Well, but it doesn't mean your database cannot be dynamic. But if the dynamic have to be repeated, just like placing order or order information and or items in the order can be considered as an entity. So let's move to the next page. All right, and also there are several different types of entity. Strong entities can exist independently of the other type of the entity, such as employees, department, jobs, and country locations, and many of the other entities in our table. But we don't have a weak entity. But if we need to have dependent entity for health insurance, the dependent entity could be could be a weak entity. The reason is some employees may or may not have weak entity. Okay. Also, the strong entity has one single line, rectangle, but it doesn't mean always all the tools has a single line to represent a strong entity. Well, it really depends on the model and the theory and your tools. Okay, such as ERWIN, which is the most popular ER design tool, has different shapes. Okay, but right now we don't have any. Also, we don't have any weak entity. We don't have any way to represent weak entity using ERD. So we have to use a slightly different way to represent weak entity. Right. So, and weak entity, by the way, according to this textbook, you can draw weak entity using double lines. Alright, well, dependents have double lines, and strong, weak dependence entity, which is a weak entity, has double line, and strong entity, which is employee, has single line. Alright, when you name the entity, it's better to have single noun, such as employees, singular noun, employee, or department and jobs. But actually it doesn't always mean singular noun. Single noun is recommended, but some scholars or experts may have slightly different opinion like me. I normally use plural nouns such as employees, departments, jobs, locations. Okay, and you have to be concise, and it have to be readable. By seeing the name entity, you have to deliver specific meaning to the audience. Alright, and also once you have noun, it's better to have noun instead of a verb for names of entities. Well, such as, well, even if you related to new employees, hire, such as a verb like hire is not recommended. Okay, if there is no proper noun, you have to use hiring. Okay, and pretty obvious. And when you define entities, you have to have well-defined attributes, because attributes separates, identifies, and separates each instance in entity, right? And also, it is better to you have to think about what attribute is required or optional, such as name is not unique identifier; it is required, right? Your student name, first name and last name are required. What about your phone number? Well, it could be optional, right? And sometimes you may have simple attributes or composite attributes, but it is okay to have composite attribute, such as address only. In the address column, you may have street number, street address, city, state, and zip code. But if you want to organize the attribute with simple attributes, you have to have separated attributes, such as street number, street address, city, state, and zip code. But in composite attribute, if you organize the attribute as a composite, all information related to address can be included in composite address attribute. But eventually, if you want to utilize your ELD to create tables, you must have simple attributes only. Okay, and also single valued versus multi-valued. You may have multi-valued. Single valued there's one attribute has one information only, such as first name you only have one first name under your column. But sometimes you may have multi-values, such as your majors. If you're double majoring, then you may have multiple majors, right? So simply if you have majors attribute which is multi-valued, it is okay at abstract or logical model. But if you cannot have any multi-valued attribute in physical model. In other words, just like composite, you must convert multi-valued attribute to multiple single-valued attributes to leverage your ERD to create tables. Okay. All right. Well, let's see optional and required. Student ID. Well, they're obviously required. Student name. That's obvious, right? That is required. And address. Well, it could be optional. Well, it is required here. And city also required and zip code is required. What about major? Is optional, right? So, except for major, because there might be some student who hasn't decided major yet, just like a freshman. Well, major could be optional, but the other columns are required, right? And composite. Can you find composite attribute here? First name. It contains first name and last name, right? And address, home address. Well, I don't see multiple information, and I don't see any multi-valued composite information regarding with the address. All attributes from address to zip code carries only atomic information. Okay, but name carries composite information. First name and last name. Okay. And multi-valued, such as skills. Well, when you write your resume, you may describe your skills. Well, sometimes I receive some favor to give recommendation or any modification for my students' resume. And you may have multiple skills in your resume, such as Visual Basic, Excel, Microsoft Office, something like this. And if you have only one column named skills column or attributes need to carry multi-values, right? May have multi-values. In that case, it is okay for this level, which is, in other words, abstract or logical ERD, but you shouldn't have any multi-valued attributes in your physical model. Okay, such as, in other words, well, major. Well, we only have one information here, but if you major accounting and finance, multiple majors carry multiple attributes. And derived can be calculated from related attributes, such as your current age. We can calculate your current age with your birthday, right? And or number of years or number of days. If you go to let's say if you go to employees, we have hire date, right? And once you have hire date is not derived, but if you have number of days column, it is derived, right? And well, actually derived is not recommended to have. The reason is you always can calculate with base column. If you have number of days attribute or column, you always recalculate to match the correct number of days for the employees, right? So derived is not the recommended, but sometimes you can have. Alright, and identifier. Well, in an attribute that uniquely identifies individual instances of the entity type. And you may have a symbol and one attribute. You can decide one attribute as identifier, or you can decide multiple attribute as a composite identifier. Okay. For instance, your student number carries multiple informations. The year you entered, and your department or college, and index number of the college or in department. So, well, even though that the form of the meaning which is carried by your student number is composite, it looks like composite identifier, but as long as the information is marked in under one single attribute, it is not composite identifier. Okay, but what if you have separate some information to multiple attributes? When you register, let me give some example, and we need to assume some. We need to make assumptions. For instance, when you register a course, what you can find is course number, right? And if one course is offered multiple sessions, multiple classes. For instance, QMTD 3600, you can find multiple sections, at least 3 or 4. Okay, so how can you separate each section? QMTD 3600 and section A, section B, or section ON. The composite, in this case, only the way to identify the sections is using course number and the section number. So using the section number and course number, we can identify each section. So those two columns are composite identifier. Okay, so and there might be several identifier which is not decided as identifier, but that is the attributes can be called candidate identifier, such as your social security number. Okay. All right, so so flight ID, such as flight number and date, those can be composite identifier, but student ID is always as long as student ID is stored in one column, it is simple identifier. Okay. And also, when you decide a name, you have to be a singular noun or noun phrase. Okay, multiple nouns or single nouns are recommended. But when you separate the nouns, it's better to have separator. And again, Oracle only allows to have 3 special characters, right? Shop, dollar, and underscore. And I use, and also the other experts will use underscore to separate, to give space between nouns, such as employee and ID. I have underscore, right? And underscore between job and ID, and underscore between job and description. So this is how to utilize underscore. And I don't have any verb. Well, sometimes you may have some other type of words, except for verb, like first and last. But normally I use noun only. Okay. All right. So. Alright, and there are some relationships, and once you decide ERD, once you decide your entity, and then the next step is to give attributes for entities. And once you're done by attribute, you have to define relationships between entities. again, technically is relationships between entities, but conceptually and fundamentally, relationships should explain instances in different entities. Okay, so that is the relationship type is one to many. There are several relationship types: one to one, one to many, many to many, and that is what many to many, right? Many to many. Okay, for instance, so and degree of relationships. There are three types of degrees: unary, binary, ternary. And when the relationship is between between instances in the same entity, the degree of relationship is unary. And if the relationship is about relationship is about instances in two different entities, it is binary. But normally binary relationships, I think it's 90% relationships about binary. And ternary relationship is about if the relationship across instances in multiple entities. Okay, so that is unary, binary, and ternary. And sometimes unary is called self-join. Okay, and cardinal relationships: one to one, one to many, many to many. So, person is married to one person only, right? Well, you may you can after divorce you can make you can marry with that other person, but let's assume that is all your current status. So you can right now you may marry with only one person, or you may not marry. So in this case, anyway, the relationship is unary and the degree of relationship is one to one. But employees, let's think about employees. One manager may manage multiple employees, right? In that case, it is still unary, unary, but cardinality of relationships is one to many, right? Binary employee may assign one parking space, and in that case, employee that is not appropriate for our campus. We can park any parking slot, right? There's an empty spot, you can park there. We don't have designated parking spot. But if you go to some universities in metropolitan area, like large cities, like NYU or George Washington University, you can apply only one parking lot. Once the parking space is assigned to you, then you always park your vehicle to the spot. Okay, so that could be applied to universities in metropolitan area or large city only. Okay, and product line can produce many products, right? And certain products can produce in only one product line. In that case, it is a one-to-many relationship. What about student course? You can take multiple courses, right? And in one course, there are many students. So, cardinality relationships between students and courses is many to many. So you have to see the crowfoot. What about ternary? Supplies. If you work in manufacturers, then you can see at least one many of manufacturers has at least 2 to 3 suppliers, right? The reason is to maintain sustainability of the logistics, and its supply may deliver to their parts to their customers to the same or designated warehouse or different warehouses. So there we can see a part vendor warehouse has ternary relationships. Add conceptual or abstract model, you can have tonal relationships, but you shouldn't have any tonal relationships in physical or relational model. You have to convert it, and I'm going to show you how to convert it. Okay, so multi-valued attribute always need to be so anyway, if there is any multi-valued in this level, in this model, in this logical model, you're okay. But this relational model or physical model, you have to convert to, you have to have additional table which is prerequisite. So let's say there might be multiple prerequisite, right? If you don't fulfill the prerequisite, then you can't add you can't take the course. So under that assumption, if the prerequisite is multi-valued, you have to separate the multi-value attribute in the form of another table, and then you're okay, right? So at the physical anyway, if you have multiple the Oracle data model doesn't allow any multi-valued, so we can't have any multi-value. But if you have your multi-value attribute in other application, you should convert it like this. Multi-value attribute should separate it from existing table, and once you separate, you must have two primary key. So right now the course has one primary key, right? And there might be multiple informations, title, date, and some other information. But multi-valued, which is separate table, will have course ID from this one and prerequisite course ID as a primary key. So you have to organize those two primary key as composite identifier, okay? And course ID is member of primary key and foreign key at the same time, because course ID refers course ID in course table. What about skills? Employee ID, well, there are many more information under employee underneath employee name, such as first name, last name. Well, that information is skipped. So anyway, employee ID, and there's skill, and you have to skill. Okay. But the reason we have another table between possess, which could be associative entity. Skills can be the same skill can be claimed by multiple employees, such as Java or database, right? And if your company decide to merge the skill types and skill as a form of skill, the skill you claimed can be claimed by other employees, right? And the relationships between employees and skills is many to many, like student and course. So any many to many relationships should be converted by having bridge or intersection table or associate table. Okay, very luckily, database modeler supports automatic convert many to many relationship in logical model to bridge or intersection or associate entity at logical model. Let me show it. Okay, let me create. What I'm going to do is create new model, new design. Okay, so I have untitled 2, and anyway, if you save the model, okay, I'm going to this is new one. Okay, and if you want to show it, you have to hit right button and show it, and you can go back to your local model and you can save your model. Okay, save as. Let me save as, and I'm going to create new table, ERD. Okay, so you can decide the name of your model. Employees. Okay, so the reason I show what you can see after saving your model is, unlike this way of saving this file is different. Unlike the other application, it leaves that data model base modeler leaves multiple files in multiple folders. So I saved in-class employee, right? But it generates one file and folders and multiple files, right? So you can't open without any files, any other files and folders in this folder. Every time you want to move your outputs, you have to copy. You have to make sure to copy, and you have to make sure if you have all those files, right? And also that file cannot be directly opened by application. Okay, the way to open the file is go to, let me close it first. You have to, let me show you, let me double click it. There's no file, there's no application designated to open the file. The way to open this file is go to or start your database modeler and go to file and open, and you have to choose DMD file. Then you can open the file, right? So you have to start the application first, and then you can open the file. Alright, anyway, let me create new design, and what I'm going to do is create two entities and with multiple attributes. Okay. Right, and depending on which model is selected, the icons could be different. If a logical model is selected, you have these icons, but if the relational model is selected, you may have different icons, right? The purpose of these buttons are quite similar to the logical model. Anyway, let me create ERD with multiple relationships, right? Let me go to student. Okay, let me have employees. Employee ID, and you have to be primary key, right? Primary key. I'm going to make a fixed number. Char. Okay, I can't find char. Not here. Okay, 20. And that have to be primary key. And let me create first name. Oh, I need to create more tables, more columns. To be for char 2 and 20. Last name. Apply, and I will create another table which will be named skills. Attributes, skill code, and you have to be maybe 10, and have to be primary key. And let me create a table. Skill title, skill type. skill title, and maybe you have to be varchar. Okay. Alright, so let me create a relationship, many-to-many relationship between employees and skills. And many-to-many is here. Click and choose do to. Alright. So I just created, right? And if you double click it, you can define foreign key. We don't have foreign key right anyway. Well, anyway, it's okay. But let me convert this model to relational model. Then you automatically have bridge table, right? Skills, employees, there's no major changes, but you have additional entity, which is a bridge or intersection. But let me go back to logical. You don't have anything, right? But you have. And what you have to do is you have to rename the name of associative entity. You can make name here possess, okay, possesses, or you can rename here. If you rename in this model, you have to engineer again. Then the name is changed as well, right? Possesses. So you can automatically create associative table using the function of Oracle Data Modeler, right? But there is no way to express there is no way to show convert multi-valued attribute to additional table because Data Modeler doesn't support any multiple values. Okay, so you have to directly create additional table to have multi-valued attributes within this application. Alright, so patient may have, well, let's see the mandatory cardinality. Patient has multiple patient history, and patient history always belong to one patient, right? In that case, it is mandatory one to mandatory many, right? If there is no if you are not patient, you can't. The physicians in your physician in your doctor's office cannot have any of your patient history, right? What about employee project? Maybe you may be as employee, you may be assigned to multiple projects, or you may not, right? In that case, it is optional many, but project needs to have at least one or multiple employees, such as Team PR has Rose and Debbie and Tom, and Debbie belongs to BPR and OO and CR team. What about Heidi? She doesn't belong to any team, right? So to represent there is a case some employee may not belong to any project, this part should be optional. Okay, again, the relationship should connect two entities in your ERD, but you have to consider every single case of instance between instances, right? Again, the relationships is about instances. Alright, so person, okay, let's say there are some employees. Charlie is married with Alice, and well, Charlie married is Alice, and Mac is married with Kathy, and Don and Fred is not married. So someone may marry with someone, or may be not married yet. So it is optional 1 to optional many, option 1 to optional 1. Okay. What about employees? Some employees may manage multiple or multiple or no employee, according to, well, it is, that relationship can be applied to our model as well, our table. Okay, in department, there's one department, and if there's a department, it is managed by the one employee, right? And in the department, there are many employees. So this is quite obvious. If you go back to your tables, and you can see columns, right? Department ID, name, and manager ID, and location ID. So, and employees, and there is employee ID and department ID. So you can see if there may be multiple relationships between two entities, right? But it doesn't mean all the two entities may have multiple relationships. Employees project, there is one relationships only, right? But there is multiple relationships between employee and department. It's pretty obvious, right? And if course is assigned to professors, one section could be assigned to one professor, and that means and also one professor may teach multiple courses. So basically the relationship between professor and course is many to many, right? And that have to be okay, so that have to be converted with using associative, another associative. In that case, there's multiple relationships between professor and course. Okay, and qualified means some faculties not qualified to graduate courses, right? But well, many of IUM faculties are qualified to teach graduate courses. If you go to if you go to research universities like urban universities and University of Alabama, and if you do a PhD or PhD, then you can teach some graduate courses, or you may teach undergraduate courses. So well, that is about qualification, right? That is about what course is assigned to professor. Again, well, that could there might be multiple relationships between two entities. All right. Okay, so again, associated entities, you can consider multiple a bridge or intersection between two entities, right? Okay, so if you read the later part of this textbook, eventually, and if you practice enough, then eventually you can draw pretty well, it's not that complicated. You can draw pretty complicated model. Okay, so the most complicated ELD I designed before is that there are almost 1,000 entities and 500 relationships between entities. When I designed cloud service, okay, but I'm not going to ask that much complicated ERD for your assignment and your final exam. All right, thank you for this is it, and this is about how ER model. But I'm going to post some examples, and I will explain the additional explanation on the example. All right, and I will see you guys in the next video clip.